Global Mongo podcast, where we go behind the scenes in the cheese world to chat with the people making, selling, or distributing your favorite specialty food products. I'm your host, Janae Muha, certified cheese professional, longtime cheesemonger, and producer advocate. If you've ever had the pleasure of joining us for an American Cheese Society conference, Rachel Perez has surely zipped by you on her way to her next commitment. From international cheese ambassador to distributor to cheesemonger, Rachel has worn many of the hats that can be worn in the cheese industry. As the current chair of the Judging and Competition Committee for ACS, she's leading the charge for some big changes this year after a 2-year-long hiatus. We discuss all the details to give you a better insight into what J&C does. Get ready, because we pack a lot of info into this episode.
My name is Rachel Perez. I am the National Sales Director for Cowgirl Creamery and Tomales Bay Foods. I am also the chair of the American Cheese Society Judging and Competition. I've been working with the Judging and Competition Committee for a decade, which is one of my great passions. I love to make sense out of chaos, and judging and competition certainly starts as chaos and then progressively makes sense. I started in cheese right out of college. I worked at a bakery in Boston called Flour Bakery, and Fromage Kitchen was right down the street. And one of my good friends from the bakery transitioned from bakery to cheese and convinced me to go over to Fromage Kitchen. I think I got the job actually because my dad is French, and I managed to pronounce 2/3 of the cheeses that were on what we call the cheese wall, which I think basically is what got me into cheese. But as you know, once you get into cheese, it's hard to get out. You know, it just kind of sucks you in. And that was 2006. So I can't even count how many years ago that was.
That's a long time.
But like what I love about it is, you know, our paths cross in cheese in sort of this very intertwined way. I know that your friend Linnea was my boss at Whole Foods in London. And, you know, just to kind of make those connections is always kind of crazy and a lot of fun.
And you've worked kind of like every level of cheese too, from distributor to cheesemaker, cheesemonger. So you've kind of done a little bit of everything, right?
Yeah. So I started as a cheesemonger. That was sort of my first hook into cheese. I worked for Fromage Kitchen, like I said, which is an independent grocery store in Boston. And then I worked for Whole Foods for 7 years. I moved to London with Whole Foods, which is where I met our friend Linnea. Shout out to Linnea. And then I came back to the States. I moved back to New York and worked for World's Best Cheese on the East Coast. And then got tired of winter and kind of wanted to change. So I came out west and worked for an independent grocer in San Francisco called King and Market. And then from there, kind of circled back deep into cheese. I became French cheese ambassador. My friend Cecile had the job before me, and she had recommended me for the job. She was kind of tired of traveling the country, pushing French cheese. So I did that, and then worked for Tony's Fine Foods, and finally for Cowgirl. So yeah, I've worked for producers, domestic, international, big companies, small companies, kind of done the whole cross section of things.
That's awesome. How did you get involved with J&C and the American Cheese Society?
So I had left World's Best Cheese in 2010, and the American Cheese Society happened to be in Montreal that year, and my younger sister lives in Montreal. And I decided it was probably a really good place to network. So I signed up to volunteer, basically signed up for every single shift, every single day, and showed up sort of for the first day of orientation. And at the time, Michelle Harum was running J&C. And so she had her little clipboard, and, we're walking around the convention center, and she goes, "Who's the one who worked for World's Best Cheese? Raise your hand." So I kind of put my hand up. She goes, "We're going to put you in a truck." So me and Tom Koyman were in the trucks. So what we've done is basically when we receive cheese for a competition, we have about 2,000 entries, a little under 2,000 entries. We have these giant refrigerated trailers that we store all our cheese in. So they're lined up with speed racks and sheet trays, and all the cheeses really cataloged in those refrigerated trailers. And so my job and Tom's job was to basically each take half of the entries, organize them in these trucks by anonymous nomenclature. So we have sort of a little coding system that we use, organize them in the trucks and get them in and out, inventory them and get them out for judging, and then back in the cooler for after judging. So the tricky thing about Montreal was, because we were going across the border, all of the cheese was consolidated. I think it was in Vermont. It might have been in Maine, but basically they consolidated the cheese on the US side of the border and then just trucked it all over at once. So normally, in normal years when we're in the United States, our cheese orders kind of trickle in over a day or two. But in Montreal, everything arrived all at once. So it was kind of a panic to receive everything, get everything sorted, and then get it in the trucks. But it was a ton of fun. I got hooked and, got to hang out with the great people on our committee. And as conference was wrapping up, I got a call from Michelle Lee, who used to be our staff liaison, asking if I wanted to join the committee. And I said yes. And 10 years later, now I'm chair of the committee.
So it's a path.
Yeah, exactly.
A long one, but a really fun one.
But you've kind of had the same thing. And I think what we try to do in judging competition really is, it's really important for us that, folks who get involved with judging competition can see the back end and also the front end. So what we always try to do is, particularly if you're in the coolers, it's a lot of physical work. It's a lot of mental work to try to get it all set. And we always try, as long as you don't work for a cheesemaker, to set you up to judge in a future year once you do that work of being a cooler captain, which I think is a really nice way for us to sort of pay it forward and give people a lot of sort of insight into how judging competition works.
There's so many moving parts that I don't think people realize how much is going on back there.
Yeah. I think it's one of the things that I felt very accomplished at one point when we started, we'd have calls and people would talk about categories. And I'm almost at the point now to which I know most of our categories by heart. So if somebody talks about category K, I know what that is. And I remember my first few calls being like, what are these people talking about? And I would have a list of our entry categories next to me so I could try to follow along and understand what people were saying.
I'm not there. And I've been on the committee for a couple of years now, and I'm still I don't know.
I think you probably know most of them.
I know them when I see them. I know how it's organized, and that's all that matters to me.
Yeah, exactly. I always forget the category, and I always think I confuse international and pasta filata, things like that. I always get a little confused about.
So we haven't had judging for the last 2 years. We were really hoping to have it last year, and it just didn't quite pan out. But we are moving in towards May in Minneapolis. So can you talk about the decision to separate competition from conference and kind of what went into that and why we're doing that this year?
Yeah. I think the thing that a lot of people don't necessarily realize about competition and conference in years past is, our committee gets into town. When the two were together, our committee would get into town a week before conference even started. We would get into town and, set up receive all the cheese, get everything organized, do all the judging, and all of that happened before conference even started. And so, we started calling our hotel rooms our homes because we were there for literally 10 days. Part of it, I think, was for our committee in particular, by the time conference started, we were already exhausted. We had done all this work. It's, 12, 14-hour days for us to put on the competition. So, that was a big piece of it. The other big piece of it is, in order to have a competition and a conference, we needed to rent out the loading docks of these convention centers for those 10 days because we had to have all the cheese for the competition and the conference. which really limited us in scope of convention centers that we could use. So we had moved to a point, like kind of a tipping point, where we were too big to run the conference in a hotel, but really too small to take on a full conference center. So we're sort of in this like gray area where we're too big for one thing, but too small for another. And so we ended up moving into, these convention centers in sort of smaller cities. So places like Sacramento, places like Des Moines, and then every once in a while we'd throw in kind of a big city. We went to Denver, we're going to Portland, things like that. And the finance piece of it kind of, wouldn't really work out, where when we were in the smaller cities, it was very affordable, but then we, had to spend a ton of money to get into big cities. So the board of directors decided, in part, the championing of the judging competition committee, that it was a good idea to start to separate. There's a whole host of reasons also. I think for one of my dreams for cheesemakers is, if we have the competition separate from conference, we have the opportunity to have the competition in the same place every single year. And having that predictability is really beneficial, in my opinion, around things like logistics, where, if we are in Minneapolis every year moving forward for the same dates, we can potentially work with cheesemakers, with guilds, to sort of create consolidation points across the state, where cheesemakers can truck their cheese in instead of having to FedEx it overnight in. So that was a big piece for me. And then the other thing that we are really looking to do is, create that consistency, and also give the conference the opportunity to sort of make a little bit more money and, I should say lose less money, not necessarily make money, but certainly lose less money, and help cheesemakers be able to showcase their cheese, their winning cheese, throughout the conference. So what we're doing this year also that's going to be different is we're opening the conference with the award ceremony. So the first thing that happens is the award ceremony. That way we can celebrate our winners throughout the entire conference.
I'm excited about that. It's going to be fun watching everybody walk around with their little ribbons all weekend, and we get to celebrate them the entire time instead of just like on one big night.
I know, it's like a blink of an eye. I feel like, it was great the way we closed the conference with, the award ceremony. It was sort of like all this anticipation sort of build up, but now we sort of start at this high point and then can just keep going higher rather than sort of going down at the end.
I think it's a big thing that people don't really realize how much work we put into reinventing the wheel every year by going to a different convention center. And we spend and for those that don't know, I'm also on the judging and competition committee. But we spend a lot of our year just working out the logistics of how we're going to receive everything in a different place. So I think it is a kind of big deal that we can start having that real consistency every year and not have to spend so much of our time just focusing on the logistics, because once we get that down, it's going to be a no-brainer. And then we can focus on all of the other things and like getting more efficient and really working on doing what's best for the cheesemakers.
Exactly. Yeah. I think people don't necessarily realize our committee meets every week for an hour for, I want to say it's 45 weeks a year. So, we try to take November and December off as much as we can, because we all work in cheese and have to deal with the holidays. But other than that, our committee meets every week for at least an hour once a week to be able to, really reinvent the wheel every single year. So you're right. Having that consistency is going to be huge for us.
And sometimes we don't even get a chance to see the spot beforehand. We're looking at pictures and like somebody else's video of trying to figure out how we're going to make this work. So there's a lot that happens on site that we're like, oh, okay, this is a little bit different than what we were thinking. And yeah, it's a lot of fine tuning that we're just not really going to have to worry about as much anymore.
Right. Yeah. We've had years where we had to like build our own ramps off the trucks because, there was a 8-inch gap between where the truck was and where the loading dock was. So, things like that are things that, our committee is used to dealing with. We get different trucks every year. So, we've had years like we had to buy lights so that we could string lights in our trucks, all sorts of little random things that we've always had to deal with that. I think that consistency of being in the same place is just going to ease the burden on our committee and really, like you said, be able to make a competition that is just going to be top notch for our cheesemakers, which is really why we do it.
So other things with judging and competition is changing too. Can you talk about any of the other things that we're doing, like new software, new whatever?
We're doing all sorts of new software, new dates. So I think that, the biggest thing is that because the competition is separate from conference, we actually push the competition up. So competition is going to be May 18th and May 19th, 2022 this year. We wanted to do it in the early spring. We felt that was the best time to do it. In part, Q4 is kind of out of the question for a lot of us because we have day jobs that we need to execute in Q4. So we sort of took that out of the picture. And then, with a bunch of trade shows going on, wintertime didn't really work for us. So we sort of felt like spring was really the best time to have the competition. And it just so happened to work out that the venue that we were going to be at this year, we are at the University of Minnesota football stadium. We are able to use that space because it's the off season for football also. They have a ton of refrigeration for us, so we don't need to worry about trucks, which is also really exciting. Certainly the date change has a lot of ramifications. Entries are open right now. All you cheesemakers out there, please enter your cheeses into our competition. The entry forms are open right now. And then the other big change that we are working on for this year is we have new software. So we used to do everything manually. And where I mean manually is like each of our judges would get a piece of paper to handwrite out their scores and their comments. We would then sort of scan them into a computer. We had a whole crew of people who had to audit all the scores to make sure that, our judges are telling their scores right. You'd think that all these, bright professors and, fabulous folks in the cheese industry know how to use a calculator, but you'd be surprised how many times we've had to send score sheets back to judges because they just didn't add it up right. So a lot of what we're doing this year is we're automating a lot of things. We are working with a new software called AwardForce, which as you enter your cheese, you enter it in the back end of AwardForce, and then we rig the whole thing so that our judges can do all of their judging on a tablet online. All of the calculations are going to be automated, which is going to be huge. We don't need to use all that paper, which, as we try to move, greener, I think is going to be huge. And I think in the long term, what we're looking to do is, we do have the ability to have QR codes through AwardForce. At some point, we'd love to be able to move away from our old sticker labeling, which was very manual, but very helpful for our committee because we sort of know how everything goes. At some point, I think we're going to probably look into using those QR codes to track everything. So this year in particular, we're basically just using those QR codes to receive. So to anyone out there who's ever done receiving with us, you'll see a bunch of folks on our competition with these like telephone size or telephone book size notebooks with all of our entries in there that we would manually check off. The ability to have that QR code where it's going to upload automatically for us is going to be huge to be able to receive cheese in real time and get it back in the fridge right away so that it's really at its peak. The other great thing about AwardForce is, this year, all our cheesemakers do need to enter all that information, your plant license, your FDA numbers, your cheesemakers, your contacts, all that sort of stuff. But moving ahead after 2022, all of that info is going to be archived. So if, as long as you don't have a new cheese, in theory, you could just sort of make a copy of your entry year after year, and it should really simplify the entering process.
We're moving into a new era.
We're a little bit nervous about it. I mean, it's really interesting. Our committee is like, we're sort of in this like paradox where, on the one hand, we are so excited about this, but all we've ever known is this sort of manual way of doing things. So trying to reconcile doing a competition in a, more technologically advanced way, in a more progressive way. We see the benefits of it, but I think we still sort of hold on to a lot of those old manual systems. Kind of like our binky. It's like we've always done it this way and we see the benefits, but like to be able to actually transform it, I think it's going to be really exciting for us.
I'm super excited because I think it's going to make things so much easier for everybody involved. So I'm super excited.
And then, we have a couple folks on our committee who are certified in lean management. So I'm really excited about being able to, be more lean forward in how we do things. We used to take a lot of steps to be able to receive stuff, and we sort of condensed our receiving line so that, we can just sort of slide trays up and down and really sort of minimize the physical time that we do to be able to make things a lot more efficient. So kind of pairing sort of ideas around lean efficiencies and then this sort of technological database, I think is going to be huge for us as a committee to be able to really bring our competition to the next level.
I agree. I mean, I've been a part of this for quite a few years now. And so I know how streamlined we have it already, even as a very manual system. So I'm really excited to see how we can streamline it even more and make it like super efficient and like the best competition out there. It already is, but
I was going to say, I think we might be a little biased, but I think it really is.
So how can people get involved?
So, we always need volunteers. It takes a village to receive 2,000 entries. We have to receive everything. We have to get it in the fridges. We have to inventory it. And then, we have 44 teams of judges. We need volunteers to be able to help us sort of move through the process. So if anybody out there is able to come out to Minneapolis and volunteer with us, that is really the best way to get involved. I know that's how you started with. That's how I started with competition. So really, really volunteering is the best way to get your foot in the door. Reach out to our committee. We have a ton of work that we need to do. I've outsourced a little bit of my work. I'm not going to lie. We are trying to set standards of excellence for our judges so that when they get a category, we're just trying to frame their palettes essentially for what they're looking for in each category. So we need some help, getting some of those standards of excellence written out. We work cross-functionally too with a lot of the other committees involved in ACS. We've reached out to the Guilds Committee to, make sure that all the cheesemakers in the guilds know that competition is open. That's a really good way to get involved. And then at conference too, the best thing to do is kind of come up to our committee members and introduce yourself, say hi. And yeah, again, if you're able to come out to Minneapolis and see this, it is amazing to see a competition actually happen from start to finish. How did you first get involved? What brought you into judging competition?
So my first conference was Seattle, and then I missed a couple years. The Montreal one was one that I was really sad to miss because I love Montreal. It's one of my favorite cities. But then I had gotten my CCP in Madison, and the next year it was in Sacramento, and I really wanted to go, but nobody was going to pay for me to go besides myself. So I decided I was going to go and just volunteer all week and just kind of see where that led me. And I volunteered with judging and competition as I can't remember if I was back. I think I did one day at back of the house and one day in judging. I can't remember exactly how that worked out, but I did some of that. And then I just volunteered all week and I just got addicted to it. I met so many people and it was such a fun experience of just like doing the work and then like talking to the person next to you and getting to know their cheese story. And you're like, oh, you're a cheesemaker from one of my favorite cheese companies. Wow. Like it was just such a cool experience and a great way to network that I had never really even considered before, but I'd only been to like a couple of conferences. So it wasn't like I had been to so many, but it was just like, wow, this is a way for me to like really get in touch with the industry in a way that I just wasn't at the time. So once I started volunteering, the next year I was the official cheesemonger for the conference in Providence, and then cooler captain and judge. It just kind of kept going until now here we are.
It hooks you in. It's
Yes.
like once you start, Stop. And I mean, I think the other thing that's really interesting is, we are very cognizant that, cheesemongers don't make a lot of money, that, it is an expense to come out and do this. But I think for you and for me, the rewards that you get out of it are incredible. I mean, the connections that I have made with, with cheesemakers, with distributors, with, other cheesemongers, the ability to be able to just talk to people openly about cheese who, might have a similar experience in a completely different area of the country is absolutely incredible. And I also think, now that, things like Airbnb have popped up, that, it really actually is a lot more affordable, that you don't need to spend, a week in a hotel and spend thousands of dollars to go out there. Was it somewhere there was a monger house in, was that Des Moines, I think?
We do it every year. We do it every year. Yeah.
But, find a group of mongers and, get a house, you can spend $30, $40, $50 a night and come out. And, we don't need folks out there for, from start to finish. If you can come out for a day, if you can come out for 2 days, and any bit of time that you can offer to come help us, it just helps us tremendously.
So what are some important deadlines people need to know?
So, like we talked about before, the call for entries is open right now. If you go to cheesesociety.org, you go over to the competition tab at the top of the bar, and that'll give you all of the instructions that you need for competition entry. Early bird entries, I believe, are open for another week or so. And then we move into regular registration. So it's about $75 to enter your cheese at the regular rate, and then it's $100 at a late rate. Late entries are open till mid-January. We opened our call for entries is a little longer this year, just to be able to get the word out to cheesemakers, since we've fallen out of habit for the last couple of years since there hasn't been a competition, and also because we're at a different time of year, we had to bump up our timeline. Our call for entries used to be in early spring, and we had to bump it up in part so that our committee can also take a little bit of time off in Q4 to do our jobs, and then come back in January and do category review. I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize is our committee spends a tremendous amount of time reviewing every single entry to make sure it's in the right category, and just, fine tuning everything to make sure that, what you entered is in the right place, so that, your cheese will perform the best that it possibly can in its category. So, that takes a tremendous amount of time. I think we divvy it up where we each get 5 or 6 subcategories to go over and review. And then, if we have questions, we come back as a committee and talk about it collectively, bounce ideas off of each other. And then, then it's all about, getting our judging teams together, setting flights, things like that. So, so again, all of that basically moved up our timelines this year. So call for entries is open till mid-January. What else is going on with us? We've gotten a few calls. I've gotten a few people reach out who are interested in volunteering already. I think there'll be more information coming out in the new year about how to get involved, who to sign up with, all that sort of stuff. So look for communication from the American Cheese Society about that. And then, like I said before, competition is May 18th and 19th. Our committee gets out there, at the beginning of the week. So the 18th and 19th are a Thursday and a Friday. We get out there Sunday and Monday to set everything up. So we, the timeline's a little different this year. In part, we wanted to receive earlier in the week so that cheesemakers do have a little bit more flexibility. In the past, we used to receive on Thursdays and Fridays and then judge Monday, Tuesday. This year, we've turned it on its head where we'll receive Tuesday and Wednesday and judge Thursday, Friday. And we're hoping that also gives cheesemakers a little bit more flexibility and a bit of a broader window to be able to get their cheese out to us. In the past, if your cheese didn't arrive on Friday for whatever reason, it generally got stuck over the weekend. And then we were, it's always rough when cheese comes in a little bit warm. We've had a couple cheesemakers that unfortunately we were not able to let judge because their cheese got stuck. So we're thinking that moving our whole competition, flipping it where we judge later in the week and receive earlier in the week is certainly going to help with that. So our committee gets out there. I want to say it's the 16th. I don't have a calendar in front of me, but I think it's Monday the 16th is when we get out there. That's really when we start to need volunteers. We'll need volunteers Monday through Friday. You know, it's amazing to be out there Thursday and Friday and see the competition in action. You know, for anyone who's never seen it before, I encourage you to come out and help us. And then trying to think what else. Those are kind of the big deadlines, I
I
think.
think those are the big ones.
Yeah.
One thing I was also thinking about too, in a benefit to the cheesemakers, why this time of year is better too, is that we've had times where we've been receiving on like the hottest day in Iowa and like trying to get all of these cheeses in refrigeration as quickly as possible in the dead heat of summer is terrible. So this is going to be nice to be able to get these cheeses in a in a state that they aren't melting already.
Yeah, especially, you know, like those FedEx trucks are not refrigerated. And, you know, when a FedEx truck pulls up and it's like floor to ceiling packed with styrofoam boxes is, you know, he stops somewhere beforehand and it's 110 degrees outside. You know, it's really easy for some cheese to cook in a hot FedEx truck. So fingers crossed we won't have a crazy heat wave in Minneapolis in May. But that was also a lot of why we picked that location is, you know, it's right in the middle of the country. We want to make sure that, you know, it's easily accessible from, you know, for folks from the West Coast all the way through the East Coast and North and South. So Minneapolis is really a nice hub. And yeah, again, we hope it's going to be a cooler time of year for everybody also. We did also actually, you know, the other thing is we added a couple new categories this year. So every other year we do look at our categories. So cheesemakers, as you enter your cheeses, you know, keep an eye out for a couple new categories. We have a spruce or a wrapped category, I think. I forget exactly what we called it, like a spruce wrapped or essentially a Mondor style category. I love that more and more cheesemakers are making that style of cheese. It's one of my personal favorites.
Same.
And so, you know, as we saw more and more entries, you know, that were made with, you know, sort of spruce wrap, we decided that it was time to add that category. We've also added a cottage cheese category. And then I think we streamlined a couple of our sheep's milk and mixed milk categories also. So, you know, keep an eye out for a couple of those new categories. We're trying to give cheesemakers as much flexibility and, you know, something as close to what they make to be able to enter and get the feedback that they need to be able to make better and better cheese.
Awesome. Well, I have the quick round that I ask everyone. Current cheese crush.
I mean, you know, I love Andy Hatch. You know, it's I'm out there trying to find my first wheel of Rush Creek right now. I think ours came into our distribution center and left right away. So I'm out hunting down some Rush Creek. I think what Andy does is absolutely incredible. I just had a little bit of Pleasant Ridge last night. But yeah, I think, you know, what he's doing is really a model for what I hope more and more cheesemakers can do in the future. What's yours?
Oh, geez.
I mean,
right now.
not to put you on the spot, but.
So I am going to start doing classes with Board at Home and Ray Rumiano. And he sent me some cheeses from the last class that he did. And he sent the Papato dry jack. And I was eating it and I'm like, this is like potato chips. It's like salt and pepper potato chips. And I just could not stop. So I was really enjoying that.
Nice. Have you been to Rumiano? Have you been to their
No,
facility?
actually, I'm just working out the details of coming down for CMI. And I think I'm going to drive so I can stop off and visit places because that's, you know, something I miss incredibly.
So where they, the reason I ask is, Ray's twin brother, Owen, is a good friend of mine. And I was up in Willows with Owen before he moved to France a couple of years ago. And when you go into the Jack room, it's basically, it looks like an old nuclear fallout shelter. It's like this steep staircase down into a cave. And, you know, it smells really musty. It's just kind of one of these old, you know, sort of traditional cheese caves. And Owen was telling us that when they were kids, that they used to play hide and go seek and go hide down there. And in particular, when their dad, John, was looking for them to go do work, they would go hide down there. And, you know, John had a sense that they were down there and he would just flip the lights off. And so they'd be like in this pitch dark, scary, cold, damp room that is just like Literally looks like a nuclear fallout shelter.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Next one, favorite pairing. Can be anything.
My favorite pairing right now is, it sounds kind of crazy. I did a class a few years ago on unconventional pairings, but right now it's Rogue River Blue 'Tis the Season with root beer.
I can see that.
If you haven't tried it, it's amazing. It the sort of salinity of the cheese brings out a lot of the vanilla flavors in a good root beer. So like a good, not too sweet sort of sarsaparilla style. And a lot of people don't like blue cheese and don't really like root beer, but the combination of the two is just absolutely incredible.
I love that.
Somebody needs to make like blue cheese ice cream so that you can do like a root beer blue cheese ice cream float.
That sounds pretty amazing.
Right.
Best right. Get on it, Rogue. Let's do it. Get on it. Best cheese memory, and it can be anything from a time you ate cheese to just a time that cheese people got together that just really sticks out in your head, traveling, whatever, just your best cheese memory.
So my favorite cheese memory. So like I said before, my dad is French. He grew up in Paris. My grandparents live in Paris. And so I would go every year around the Salon du Fromage, which is a big trade show in France. And I would come, and my grandmother would always get a Mont d'Or. And her favorite thing was to take, after we ate sort of the entire thing, she'd sort of take the skeleton of it and would just sit there for hours and scrape all the cheese by the rind and eat it. And so I have an old picture of my grandmother with a box of Mont d'Or and a spoon of cheese in her mouth. But just eating Mont d'Or with my grandmother is brings back great memories.
That's awesome. Especially since I just interviewed Kira James, who is also a Formaggio Kitchen alumni, and her favorite memory was giving her dad and giving her family Mont d'Or. And so I love that. I love that we all have, these memories, because one of mine is also that I got to go to Besançon and my friend took me to the cheese shop. They bought a big one. They stuffed it with garlic and white wine and baked it until it was just an ooey gooey mess. And it was the best night ever. It was amazing.
Somebody once told me that the way to get a ripe Mont d'Or is when they wrap it, that the cheese will puff up to the surface, and that's when you know that your Mont d'Or is the ripest. And I've always sort of abided by that too. I think it's a great little tidbit for folks who are looking for Mont d'Or.
It's the best part of the cold weather.
I know, right?
Is the gooey, yummy cheeses.
Always.
Well, is there anything else that people need to know about judging and competition? I'll put all of the information of deadlines and websites and whatnot in the show notes so people can access that. But is there anything else that we didn't cover that you think that we need to talk about?
We talked about new categories. We talked about call for entries is open, different time. I think the only other thing is enter, come volunteer with us, come see how it's done. If you're interested in judging, we feel strongly that being able to see the back end of it is the best way to be able to, set yourself up for judging. We just think it's really important that our judges see sort of the whole context of what we do so that they can appreciate, what our volunteers do and, really, and what our cheesemakers do and really execute to the highest level. I have tapped the entire board of directors to come out and volunteer with us. So we are going to put the entire board of the American Cheese Society to work that whole week also. And, regardless of whether you work for a cheesemaker, you're a cheesemonger, you work for a distributor, even if you just love cheese, it's, we're open to everybody. We need all the hands that we can get. So please come out and volunteer. And cheesemakers, enter your cheese. It's, now's the time to get that good feedback. You've had 2 years to perfect your recipes. So, we're expecting to see some outstanding cheese this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Rachel.
Thank you, Janae.
Rachel's dedication and drive for this industry leaves me in constant amazement. We're lucky to have someone so motivated to take us to the next level. Thanks, Rachel, for digging in with the ins and outs of what to expect this year at JNC. This podcast is recorded, produced, and edited by me, Janae Muha. Thank you to Ben Muha for allowing me to use your music. Follow along on my cheesy adventures at Instagram, Facebook, or Patreon. My website is also a great place to find everything in one place, plus some fun merch. If you like the podcast, tell a cheesy friend. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to keep spreading the word of good curd.